Tonight on Primetime Politics, undermining the Carney record.
He advised governments to print copious amounts of money, giving us the worst inflation in 40 years.
Conservatives poke holes at the Prime Minister's track record, minimizing his academic background, condemning his policy choices, and questioning what he has achieved in his first year in office. Coming up, the auto bureau chiefs will give us their take on the Conservative strategy and the impact it may have on the public's perception of the Prime Minister. Plus,
and one day, if you guys want to join the European Union, let's talk about it.
Okay.
Bienvenue.
Making the case for Canada's entry into the EU. We'll speak to two members of the European Parliament who attended last week's Liberal National Convention. This is Primetime Politics. Hello everyone, I'm Michael Serapio. Well, having lost another member of his caucus to the Liberal benches last week, the Conservative leader is back on the offensive, with Pierre Poilievre attacking the Prime Minister's economic record at a Canadian Club luncheon in Toronto.
Mr. Carney has been wrong about every major economic issue of the last decade. When he was the head of the Bank of England, he printed money leaving that country with the worst inflation in the G7 and a housing crisis that deprived an entire generation of youth of home ownership. He wrongly predicted that COVID would cause deflation, that prices would drop. And the result was that he advised governments to print copious amounts of money, giving us the worst inflation in 40 years.
Now, Poilievre's speech picks up on the criticism he made over the past weekend, poking holes at the Prime Minister's reputation for being the, quote, right man to handle the economic challenges Canada currently faces. A general impression amongst many Canadians backed up by months of polling. But take a listen to how Mr. Poilievre pushed back on that in a recent interview with the Canadian Taxpayers Federation.
There's one thing that's worse than being uneducated, and it's being badly educated. And Mr. Carney is very badly educated on economics. And that is why he has been wrong on every single economic issue of our time. Every one of them. Net zero, his net zero alliance, which was meant to defund our energy sector, that alliance has gone bankrupt. His money printing, his support of carbon taxes, his opposition to the pipeline to the Pacific.
Well, the Poilievre offensive is how we started this week's episode of the Bureau Chiefs with Michael Serapio. Here now are Robert Fife, the Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Globe and Mail, Tonda MacCharles, the Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star, and Joël-Denis Bellavance, the Ottawa Bureau Chief for La Presse. So, we're going to talk about the specific criticisms in a moment. But first, I want to talk about the timing of all this, because, when Parliament was not sitting, we were talking about how we were now seeing this more diplomatic, perhaps more conciliatory approach from the Conservative leader. Parliament returns, and so does the pugilist. Talk to us about the timing and why you think we're hearing this strategy now, Bob.
Well, because that's in his DNA. He can't help himself. I mean, how many times has we've said, oh, he's going to back off, he's going to reinvent himself, he's going to be a kinder, gentler Pierre Poilievre, and he jumps right back to being, the nasty little partisan guy that he has been for 20 years in Parliament. The leopard can't change his stripes. Or spots, I should say.
That leopard I want to see. Tonda, what do you make of the timing of this?
I mean, the timing, I think, is more prompted by the pressure he's feeling within his own caucus, and that, having lost now 4 of his own caucus members, and knowing that there is a number of others who object to his leadership, he's in defense mode. And I think, I'm not sure whether it was because he felt he was in a comfortable place to say something like that, but tactically and strategically, that line of attack against Carney, his badly educated on economics, was, factually incorrect, but doesn't make any sense. I mean, in some respects, on some of the go-forward economic agenda direction, the Conservatives actually support some of the things that Carney's proposing, moving faster on resource development, streamlining some of the regulations. Now, the Conservatives would have him go faster, but to suggest that Carney's an economic idiot doesn't seem to me to be the way to go. It's not in line with what Canadians believe. He's not reinforcing a message that works for him, or I'm sure a lot of his MPs are probably sitting there thinking, that's probably not the smartest route.
Okay, Joël-Denis?
I like the fact that you pointed out that we've seen two Pierre Poilievre in the last couple of weeks when the House was not sitting. I think that speech was particularly to his caucus. But now that he's lost more MPs, I think now he made a speech this week addressed to the base of the Conservative Party to keep his job as leader of the Conservative Party, because I think he's losing more and more support within the Conservative Party, although no one so far has took the initiative, and no one has taken the initiative of, invoking the Reform Act or the steps to get rid of the leader. But those two speeches, to me, indicate that Mr. Poilievre is less and less secure in his job. Why go back on that kind of a MAGA-style speech that we've seen this week? I don't understand it, other than to say that now he fears for his job and he's trying to protect his support from his base.
Look, a lot of Conservatives don't understand it either. I mean, don't go after Mark Carney on his economic credentials. Mark Carney has a BA from Harvard. He's got an MA and a PhD from Oxford University. He headed two central banks, and he was vice chair or chair of a $1 trillion corporation. Pierre Poilievre got a BA from Carleton, which he never finished. He had to do it through I believe a write-in course, and he spent 20 years in Parliament. And Conservatives are saying that's not the issue you want to fight him on. You don't have any credentials. And then you have Christine Lagarde, the former IMF president, who's also now the president of the European Central Bank, coming out and lauding Mr. Carney for his the way he handled the 2008 financial crisis with all the central bankers and putting the kind of regulations in place, and also applauding him for the way he warned the UK off of Brexit. I mean, this is not a hill you want to die on.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And to that, Christine Lagarde, when she wrote, this was for Time magazine, she described him as a rock star bank governor. So point taken. But I'll also make the point that I went to Carleton, great school.
You're not criticizing Carney. You're not claiming you have more economic credentials than him, do you?
No. I just have more foundation. You talked about the pressure that Pierre Poilievre's under, though, Tonda. What are you hearing about that? Because yes, it doesn't look good to have four crossover, right, in the past few months, and there is speculation that there will be more floor crossers to come, and more likely from the Conservative caucus than any other caucus on the Hill. So talk to us about the kind of pressure you're hearing, the kind of tension you're hearing that exists right now amongst that Conservative caucus.
I spoke to a senior Conservative, not inside caucus, but someone who has pretty direct lines inside that caucus and has a real relationship of trust with a number of MPs, who said that they actually do have the numbers if they were to go and invoke the caucus power to force a secret ballot on leadership, but they also know they do not have someone to come forward and take that on, either as be the leader of the charge or someone who can step into the breach to be the leader, who wants to take on the challenge of trying to replace Pierre Poilievre. So that's the tension inside. Mm-hmm. There are many Conservative MPs, though I don't think the majority, who are very dissatisfied and worried about their political futures under Poilievre right now. But where do they go? There is no, back in the day of Stockwell Day, when he was leading the Canadian Alliance, there were a number of MPs, popular MPs, Chuck Straw, Monty Solberg and whatnot, who organized their way out of the then Canadian Alliance caucus under Stockwell Day and formed a separate caucus, the Democratic Reform Caucus. And then they eventually joined hands with the other conservative option, the Progressive Conservatives, to move forward. Until Stephen Harper came and rallied them all together. Right now, there is no other, if you're a Conservative who's dissatisfied with Pierre Poilievre's leadership inside caucus and you don't want to be a Liberal, there's no other vehicle unless you're prepared to take the whole crew with you and walk out, and that's not happening. But tension there is inside, and I don't think we've seen the end of it.
Yeah, what are you hearing, Joël-Denis?
I agree with Tonda. There's a lot of tensions within the caucus. I'm surprised that we haven't seen anybody from Quebec Tory caucus now leave the caucus because I would have...
that was the speculation, by the way.
Yes.
Tonda and I were in Montreal for the Liberal convention. That was the discussion, that it's probably the Quebec wing of the Conservative Party that people are looking at.
I know for a fact that the Liberals are talking to 3 Quebec MPs, the Conservative MPs, but they're really reluctant to make a move now. But, you know, unsatisfaction is growing. And I wouldn't be surprised. I'm surprised that nobody has made a move from Quebec, but I wouldn't be surprised if this comes in the coming weeks, because the speech that Mr. Poilievre made this week, I don't think has convinced Conservative MPs from Quebec that Mr. Poilievre is going the right way, attacking the economic credentials or arguing who's got the biggest CV between Mr. Poilievre and Mr. Carney. I don't think he's winning the hearts and souls of voters in Quebec, and so I think there is going to be a lot of soul searching within the Conservative caucus in Quebec. And if that's the case, if somebody from Quebec does quit and sit as an independent or join the Liberals, I think this is going to be the final straw.
The strangest thing about that economic speech he gave was not just that they doubled down on what we've just been discussing, but that most of it, was the platform that voters rejected, the platform that didn't win him enough support to form government, despite having grown the vote share last year. And only a part of it dealt with some of the more constructive proposals he's put forward on the table now. Instead of what he did abroad when he went to London and Berlin, and what he did in Toronto prior to that, and some of what he did in the States was to put forward some other ideas to counter the Carney agenda. And in this speech, I found it was very much a throwback. And I thought, I don't understand it.
Any point in that, Bob?
Well, look, I've heard the same thing as Tonda and JD, that they are continuing to talk to Conservative MPs. They are focusing, some of them are focusing on the Quebec Conservative caucus. But I expect that we are going to see more defections. And I think what happened this week, the way Mr. Poilievre behaved, is the kind of thing that just makes people shake their head and say, look, I'm out of here. I do wonder what is the level of patience among the Conservative caucus when so many of them ran with the expectation that they would govern, because the nomination process happened for many ridings when Trudeau was still Prime Minister. How many of them will have the patience to sit for 3.5 years before a federal election? It's pretty demoralizing to be sitting on the opposition benches for a chance at winning government, because we don't know if that will happen in 3.5 years. I mean, when you look at the poll numbers, it's almost insurmountable. I mean, obviously it can change. We all know that, but the fact that Mr. Carney is leading by he's at 29%, and Mr. Poilievre is way behind him
in preferred Prime Minister. And the Liberal Party is still is ahead about 13 or 14 points. That's pretty demoralizing. And now they've got a majority. What are you going to do? Just twiddle your thumbs on the opposition benches? And the problem that Mr. Poilievre has had throughout his leadership is that he's a one-man band. He doesn't work with the caucus. He's not like a Brian Mulroney, can bring everybody together. That's not his style. And that's why you end up seeing people saying, hell with this, I'm going to go sit with the Liberals, and I can hopefully do something for my constituents, or maybe even when there's a cabinet shuffle, get into cabinet.
The minority government, it brought in itself some discipline within the Conservative caucus, because if there's an election to fight next month or in 6 months, they were sticking together. Now that the election is 3 years away, I think it will loosen up some minds and probably be thinking about, am I going to be a candidate under the leadership of Pierre Poilievre in the next election? That's the question now that they're asking themselves.
But the only thing he's got going for him right now, frankly, is, as Tonda says, there's nobody obviously in the wings.
Well, I will say, when we were covering the Calgary Conservative Convention, you looked at the coalition. This is a coalition built by Pierre Poilievre, and so that is the bit of the conundrum for. It's
not much of a coalition, frankly. It's right wing and MAGA.
Well, but still, someone will have to lead it if he leaves
a coalition is what you're seeing Mark Carney put together, which is you know, a lot of progressives, some conservatives, some centrists, or the old Conservative Party of Brian Mulroney, which is had red Tories, conservatives, and right wingers. And right now, this party, the party that Pierre Poilievre has built, is pretty much to very much right of center.
Yeah. Okay, listen, I'm going to pick up on that coalition in a moment, but you were mentioning numbers earlier, Bob, and I was looking at 338 Canada. We have a graphic here. Take a look at basically the approval rating when it comes to what Canadians think about this government. And when 338 Canada aggregates all the polls, you're looking at a 58% approval rating for this government, which has me wonder the effectiveness, whether or not the criticisms that Pierre Poilievre has made about Mark Carney, and I take all your points about his past CV, his educational accomplishments, but when he goes through everything he predicted was wrong, is there any potential that type of argumentation might actually poke holes at the Prime Minister's popularity and or his standing amongst Canadians right now?
I mean, I think that the more relevant criticism is not whether or not you agree with whatever Mark Carney's views were over the last decade. The more relevant criticism that Pierre Poilievre could make that might have some traction with Canadians right now is he landing a good deal for Canada with the U.S.? Is he managing to get breaks? Is he going to tackle the housing and affordability and immigration issues in the country with practical solutions that fix things in people's lives? Those are the kinds of things that maybe will have traction with Canadians. I don't see the look back as the thing. It's the forward-looking thing. And to that sort of point, I don't see that Poilievre is successfully prosecuting the Carney government and its agenda in the eyes of Canadians. Those numbers, I mean, the other thing that 338canada.com has shown is that when you look at all the polls, there's anywhere from a 6 to 13 point lead across the board for the overall party, not just government approval, but the Liberals are leading the entire Conservatives, not just preferred Prime Minister, the likability of Mr. Carney versus Mr. Poilievre. The parties themselves now that gap is widening. So I think that's a big problem.
Yeah, gap is wide, and Liberals building base even in Alberta at this point, which is very notable.
Conservatives think that they would lose seats in Saskatchewan, that Carney, that Carney is eating into the Western base of support. So
to prosecute properly, I think one question has to be asked by the opposition parties. Are you better off today than you were 12 months ago when Mr. Carney arrived on the scene? And this is not what they're doing. They're prosecuting the time that Mr. Carney was in the Bank of England. It's not relevant to Canadians' life today. It's not something that they can use to argue that the price of bread has increased over the last 12 months. It's not relevant. So it's fanciful arguments that's not, laying any punch on the Liberal brand, in my sense.
You've got to hope that Carney comes out and starts talking about the price of arugula or something like that, or the price of filet mignon. I mean, right now, it's a hard argument to land. Most people think and believe that Carney has the credibility to at least try. So,
he's got a lot of credibility on the economy, but he has to deliver. And we just don't know right now. The jury's really out. I mean, we don't know if we're going to be heading into recession because of the oil crisis caused by the war in Iran, and we don't know if we're going to be able to get a deal with the United States. And if we don't get a deal with the United States, that's even more job losses. And if you get job losses coupled with AI coming down like a freight train, which will obviously mean a lot more job losses. If people start losing their jobs and the cost of living goes up, and the Liberals, Mr. Carney's plans are not immediate. They're long-term plans he's set out. The situation could change very quickly. I'm just not sure that Pierre Poilievre is the kind of guy that's going to be able to prosecute the case for the Conservatives anymore. I think he's baked in now with Canadian voters. I'm not sure he can turn it around.
And our thanks once again to the Bureau Chiefs, Robert Fife, Tonda MacCharles, and Joël-Denis Bellavance. So earlier this week, we noted the visit of Finland's president to Canada. Alexander Stubb not only having a personal friendship with the Prime Minister, but also one of many European leaders who, like Canada, are now looking for ways to diversify trade and military relationships. All of this in the wake of the Trump White House. Now, Stubb is also one of several leaders who are encouraging Canada to join the European Union, an idea that was raised by two members of the European Parliament with whom I spoke on Saturday last week during the Liberal National Convention in Montreal. Well, attending this Liberal National Convention are two members of European Parliament, one from Ireland, the other from Germany. Cynthia Mhurchú is from Ireland. Andreas Glück is an MEP from Germany. Hello to the two of you.
Hello to you and thank you.
So, I think people might be surprised that there are MEPs here gathered in Montreal observing this convention. But the two of you are here because you are part of a grouping in the European Parliament called Renew Europe. And part of that is the belief that Canada is becoming one of the EU's most strategic allies. I think that quote is actually from you, Cynthia. So I'll get you to start us out. Why do you think that?
Certainly, Canada has the same values, the same liberal values of the Liberal Party that we have in Renew Europe and in many other parties and groups in Europe. And we want more synergy and we want a bigger and better relationship with Canada, not just for security defence, but for our businesses, for education, for our culture and also for our tourism. So it's really important, as the old order is now in decline, as PM Carney outlined at Davos in that infamous speech, that we now not only look for new partnerships and forge them, but that we actually actively do it at speed. And Canada is an obvious one for Europe, and in particular for my home country, Ireland, that you mentioned, because our ties go back many, many years.
Absolutely, and there are deep ties with Canada, with Ireland, with Germany. I'm going to pick up on the Davos speech in a moment, but Andreas, I'll get you to jump in here, because when Cynthia talks about building more synergy between Canada and the European Union, well, we already have a comprehensive trade agreement with Europe. I don't know if that's being used to the best advantage quite yet, but can that be the type of building block that you two are exploring when you're here in Canada?
So first of all, we have two reasons to be here. Like, from a liberal perspective, it is to see why and how liberals are so successful in Canada. So this is like the one dimension of our trip. But as you rightly mentioned, the other reason why we are here is because we want to go beyond what we have with our trade agreement CETA. I think this is the beginning of a very wonderful partnership. It is already going back for several years. CETA was a huge step, but now I believe the world changed. And there are not so many partners with the same values we share, and therefore I believe CETA is only one step on a long way, on a long journey and a long friendship.
Well, certainly that has been talked about ever since Donald Trump has changed, this country's understanding of our trade future. This Prime Minister in particular has been talking about diversifying, increasing trade with other partners, including Europe, with whom we've already signed an agreement. Now, Cynthia, you mentioned Davos, and certainly that speech from Mark Carney got a lot of attention around the world, but is it having any more resonance than that? Because he's calling on middle powers to stand up and to speak more loudly together. Are there willing players in Europe to take up that call?
Absolutely, more than ever. This is a crisis for us as we refine and redefine the world order. And so therefore, yes, of course, PM Carney's message is finding a great welcome and a great interest in Europe. And it's no wonder that we've had the EU-Canada summit. It's no wonder, from my own perspective in Ireland, that we've had a bilateral between Ireland and Canada, and more to come. And I'm delighted to say that as Ireland leads out as presidency of the European Council from July to December of this year, you can be darn sure that Canada and PM Carney will be front and centre and involved in that. We already have the Coalition of the Willing. We already have PM Carney's commitment to European values. And quite frankly, this is my third visit within 12 months to Canada. And to me, Canada represents the most EU country outside of the EU that I have witnessed. And that is because of the values, it's because of the liberal values, and also the commitment to hard work and a fair wage for a fair day's work, but also looking after communities that might be less well off and people who are less well off. So those values are super important now as we see the rise of the far right throughout Europe and indeed throughout other parts of the world. And we also see a left rising as well. So these polarities are never good. But us liberals, Liberal here, and obviously Renew Europe in Europe, we are in the middle. And what are we? Well, could I describe us, please, as just the workhorses? We are there to try and keep all those interests supported, maintained, but also with a strategic eye on the future.
Andreas, what would you say about the resonance that the Prime Minister Mark Carney's speech had in Davos, but beyond Davos now in Europe?
I mean, of course, Davos was a political speech. And now it is on us, it is like on our people to add flesh to the bone now. So we actually have to fulfill this partnership with real life. So from my perspective, for example, I'm not only an MEP, I'm also a medical doctor. I still work in a hospital. When it comes to medical devices, for example, when it comes to AI, for example, we have to find a third way. We don't want this American way with all the private sensitive data being stored on private company servers, pretty much uncontrolled. But we also don't want to go the Chinese way, for example, that we have it on government servers, like private data on government servers. So we actually see the need to go a third way, and we want to go this way together with Canada. So this is one example of how we can put flesh to the bone.
Andreas is right, and the other way to put flesh on the bone is that CETA agreement that you've mentioned.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm sorry to say that my country, Ireland, we ran into a constitutional difficulty with regards to a challenge to the CETA agreement, that trade agreement. But countries that have ratified it already in Europe, and it's the vast majority of countries, they're already reaping the rewards and the benefits of CETA. So my government has committed to completing the CETA agreement within the lifetime of this government. And I see my role as an MEP on the EU-Canada delegation, country delegation, and also in my role as a member of the IMCO committee, which is the internal market looking after business and consumers. I see it my responsibility and my role to ensure that CETA is ratified and promoted throughout the rest of the countries, the remaining countries, including Ireland, that is yet to ratify it. Because it's through those trade partnerships that we're going to benefit the citizens that put Andreas in office and myself in office.
Now, I suspect you find this encouraging, but recent polling here in this country indicates that nearly 60% of Canadians either support or are open to joining the European Union. I don't know if you think that is a possibility or how a formalization of a relationship could come about. I wanted to share some thoughts on that.
Well, look, from my perspective, greater brains and greater minds than I will deliberate on that. But I can tell you from the couple of visits that I've had, very enjoyable visits, very productive visits to Canada over the last 12 months, that I understand there will be technical blockages there, but, you know, Canada doesn't have to be a fully fledged, signed up member of the European Union to actually be in spirit, and by spirit I mean in a working, good functioning working relationship and synergies. It doesn't have to be a member. I consider Canada already a member. I consider PM Carney a huge ally, a huge friend to Europe and also to other countries, and we want to get that liberal message out there because liberalism is so important now on the stage of politics in order for it to find its voice and not to be drowned out, as I've said already, by the far right and the hard left.
And just to come back to that, I don't see any limitations to this partnership. So we are open for everything. We share the same values, and this is really a wonderful friendship. And it doesn't make any sense to say, okay, we want to be friends, but only a little bit, and we want to limit it to a certain point. No, it's a friendship, it's a partnership, and of course, no limitations. And one day, if you guys want to join the European Union, let's talk about it.
Okay. Well,
bienvenue.
Well, I will leave it at that. I will say if you're going to visit Canada again, it's lovely in the summer. Cynthia, Andreas, thank you for that.
Lovely. Every season is lovely.
I did a lot of skiing in Canada. It's also lovely in winter.
There we go. It's true. I do a lot of skating. Thank you for the time.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And that is Primetime Politics for this Friday. I'm Michael Serapio. For everyone here at CPAC, thank you for watching. Primetime Politics is back next week. Until then, take care and have a great weekend.